I love case studies just because, real world experiences, building apps, shipping apps, having users using your apps, all of that type of stuff. So this should be a fun one. Um, Dean here is the managing director of digital and technical innovation for StoryCorps. A self-described civic hacktivist. I'm not sure what that means. What is that exactly?
I'm trying to.
Oh, no mic.
It's a good test run for the mic there. Just trying to, in my spare time, trying to open up democracy to a bunch of people who don't pay attention to what's going on in our political landscape.
Awesome.
If that's you, register to vote, please, and call your Congress people because shit's hitting the fan.
Cool. So you want to have it on here?
I think I'm okay.
Okay. Go ahead, press play.
All right. Great.
Excellent.
So I want to entertain you today, and I want to make you feel. Maybe that's not what you expect at a tech conference, but maybe someday it will be. The thing is, I want to give you something of value today, but given the brain power represented in this room, the depth of the medium we're talking about, and all the details of a quickly expanding industry with a universe of challenges and opportunities facing it, do I talk about front end, back end, hardware, QA testing across 8,000 different devices? Chances are I won't be able to cover any of it effectively in 25 minutes. So to entertain you, I'm going to tell you all about the new StoryCorps app and platform that we built, briefly how we got to where we are today. And to make you feel as we go along, I'm going to play you stories from the StoryCorps archive. What I hope to leave you with is real excitement for the humanistic potential of PhoneGap and related technologies. I hope to demonstrate how remarkably accessible this stack is and can be to organizations like StoryCorps. If you carry something away about product development or rapid prototyping, even better. So, if you don't know, StoryCorps is one of the largest collections of human voices ever assembled. We record interviews between everyday people like you and me, our friends and family, and people entirely different from us. And we share them with the world today and tomorrow in our growing archive. Most people know us from our radio broadcast on NPR's Morning Edition or from our YouTube channel, podcast, or PBS. Our goal is to represent everybody, to teach the subtle power of listening to one another, and to remind us how alike we all really are, despite our differences. Here's an example of our work. Some of you may have heard this piece, which was broadcast on March 20th, 2015 on NPR's Morning Edition. This is 9-year-old Aiden Sykes interviewing his father, Albert, who runs an education nonprofit and mentors kids who are struggling in school. Their interview was recorded in Jackson, Mississippi, and I really hope the audio works.
Do you remember what was going through your head when you first saw me?
I remember when the doctor pulled you out, the first thing I thought was that he was being too rough with you. And he actually held you like a little Sprite bottle, and he was like, "Here's your baby." That was the most proud moment of my life. Don't tell your brothers, because it's three of y'all. But it was like looking at a blank canvas and just imagining what you want the painting to look like at the end, but also knowing you can't control the paint strokes. The fear was just, I got to bring up a black boy in Mississippi, which is a tough place to bring up kids, period. But there are statistics that say black boys born after the year 2002 have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. And all three of my sons were born after the year 2002.
So, Dad, why do you take me to protest so much?
I think I take you for a bunch of reasons. One is that I want you to see what it looks like when people come together, but also that you understand that it's not just about people that are familiar to you, but it's about everybody. Did you know the work that Martin Luther King was doing was for everybody and it wasn't just for black people?
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah. So that's how you got to think. If you decide that you want to be a cab driver, then you got to be the most impactful cab driver that you can possibly be.
Are you proud of me?
Of course. You my man. I just love everything about you, period.
The thing I love about you never gives up on me. That's one of the things I will always remember about my dad.
You said it like I'm on the way out of here, or like I'm already gone.
So, Dad, what are your dreams for me?
My dream is for you to live out your dreams. It's an old proverb that talks about when children are born, children come out with their fists closed because that's where they keep all their gifts. And as you grow, your hands learn to unfold because you're learning to release your gifts to the world. And so, for the rest of your life, I want to see you live with your hands unfolded.
So their interview was recorded in one of our story booths, like the 60,000 interviews we recorded before the launch of our app. This one was facilitated by a highly trained professional in a soundproof room with professionally calibrated and operated equipment. After each interview, a copy goes home with the participant, one to StoryCorps, and one to the Library of Congress. If any of you have ever sat in one of our booths and had a conversation with a friend or loved one, there's a booth in San Francisco, by the way, you'll probably agree that it's a transformative experience to look across the table at your interview partner, asking questions you've never asked before, putting on record the experiences of your life, and participating in something other people can learn from. This is the StoryCorps experience. It opens you up to the world, or as our founder puts it, you realize that there is more that unites us as people than divides us. I'm talking about the people closest to you and the people furthest away, our friends and family, and the other, too. Our mission is to create a more unjust, compassionate world, to bring people together, and preserve and share humanity's stories. So, who am I? I'm the Managing Director of Digital and Technical Innovation at StoryCorps. I started working there 7 years ago as their first IT manager. Over that time, I built our tech support, data, and web teams and the systems that make up our archive, business intelligence, and public-facing tech. Now I run the digital team, working across the organization to hone our digital footprint and create some really awesome apps and services. My team is working on StoryCorps' mission on the web and on a growing ecosystem of devices. We're experimenting with technology to facilitate real, quality connections between people, using the web as a tool for sharing from deep within ourselves about our experiences. At the very least, we're creating a lasting archive of humanity that generations into the future can access to hear the voices of their ancestors, share wisdom, and learn about people from people. Someone at TED noticed StoryCorps' work, and in late 2014, our founder, Dave Isay, was awarded their $1 million prize. His wish was to create an app, a platform for the human voice, a tool for anyone, anywhere to record and archive a meaningful conversation with someone using a mobile device and share it with the world forever. That's exactly what PhoneGap, Angular, Ionic, WordPress, and SoundCloud helped us debut to the world. And if you've contributed to any of these projects, one of their dependencies or plugins, thank you for making what I'm about to share with you possible. The story of our app begins around 2008 with StoryCorps' first ever National Day of Listening. The idea was simple. On the day after Thanksgiving, instead of just shopping, interview someone you care about, or even a complete stranger, as the least expensive but most valuable gift you can give to someone. There was a lot of enthusiasm about the event. Tons of people participated. Testimonials rolled in telling us what we had hoped, that people were inspired to have conversations they had never had before, that this experiment had succeeded in bringing people closer to their interview partner, that people were sharing, listening, connecting. We weren't recording these interviews yet, only encouraging people to interview each other and attempting to create a safe space between people where meaningful conversations could occur. In other words, we weren't just helping people talk to each other, but creating an occasion for deeper conversations than usual to take place, helping them ask each other great questions like, how would you like to be remembered? Have you ever lied to me? What was the happiest moment of your life? What was the saddest? It takes courage and presence to do this for one another, but it's absolutely worth it. I'm convinced it makes you a better person. So after a few years, after our first National Day of Listening, our team had been experimenting with the SoundCloud API, and we built a very minimally viable little web app that allowed the user to basically record and upload a piece of audio to a WordPress site from within the browser. We had an intern on the team who was really kicking ass in JavaScript, who, with our marketing team, lead developer, and myself, the entirety of our team at the time, pulled together an update to our National Day of Listening microsite to launch this little web app as sort of a proof of concept just to see if anybody would use it. Somewhat to our surprise, a few hundred people, mostly teachers and high school students, did find it useful, which was awesome, but at the time we didn't have the staff or resources to really make a big deal out of it. Nevertheless, we left the platform up year-round, and we tacitly began a new, very low-touch StoryCorps interviewing model for the web. We gave no fanfare to the concept at all. It was basically a stealth launch. Then in late 2013, we applied for a Knight Foundation prototype grant, hoping they would see the potential for the project as we did. These are $35,000 grants to take ideas from concept to demo. I highly encourage you to apply if you have an idea in line with their mission. If you want to talk to me about that later, please do. Our pitch was a mobile DIY StoryCorps app, a simple proof of concept that would let people record an interview, add a photo and metadata, and upload it to our do-it-yourself microsite. More than building the technology, though, we wanted to see if we could find a sustainable workload and stack that would allow us to support a mobile app year after year, given modest, nonprofit-like resources and staffing. Our pitch was successful. We moved quickly to deliver on our MVP. One of the first considerations we had to make was which platform was the best fit, given our staffing, resources, and objectives. You see, around 2009 or so, StoryCorps actually had an app. It was a nice iOS-only native app built pro bono by a very generous company, and as such, it was necessarily minimal. It let people browse and play our broadcast pieces, but not create interviews. It let people create a list of great interview questions and send it via email, and it gave people tips and best practices on doing their own interviews. But when we look at the cost of expanding it and the cost of sustaining it with no one in-house to support it, given that our web team was essentially 1.5 people with enough work for 10, as is unfortunately, by the way, usually the case in nonprofits, hiring a dedicated iOS developer or consultant wasn't even close to a possibility. The result was that our first app from 2009 was never updated, and it no longer exists. Problems like this bankrupt companies and stifle really great ideas all the time. We learned a lot of valuable lessons with our native app. The strengths and weaknesses of a technology often have nothing to do with the technology itself, but with the fitness of the technology to the environment in which it is created and sustained. We knew we had to tread very carefully to make something we'd be able to grow over time. So with these lessons in mind, we proceeded very cautiously toward our goal of a sustainable prototype. The intern, who I mentioned before, who excelled at JavaScript, had by now become what I can only describe as a gifted full-stack developer and was now officially part of the team. He pitched the idea of PhoneGap, which he had started to investigate for his own side projects, and we considered our options very carefully. To be honest, we looked at PhoneGap with a lot of caution, and maybe some of you out there had the is it too good to be true reaction as well. We thought, though, that since we were just building a prototype, if it didn't work as expected, it would be worth the cost of learning, and we would just move on. We put together an extremely basic proof of concept, compiled it for both iOS and Android, and it just worked. It wasn't as snappy as a native app, which I'm sure most of you know, at least not in the way we implemented it. And there were a few obvious challenges we eventually would have to get around: a pause button for recording, for instance, and a volume meter to give visual feedback to the user while recording. But this little app was built painlessly in-house with technologies our developers already knew really well. And the same code base worked across different devices, which meant we had an approach that might be sustainable, even for a small team and a minimal nonprofit budget, something I wasn't sure would ever be possible. I've had a lot of conversations with app developers who swear by native development, and I completely understand why they say that. But I don't think it's a case of either or at all. It just depends on what you're building, which incidentally is always the situation no matter what you're building. You have to consider the fit of the technology for the environment. We had stumbled upon a good fit, and if it was such a good fit for us, we thought, then it stood a good chance of getting better and better as it matured. Here's what our first prototype looked like, built in PhoneGap. So by November of 2014, we had nearly completed work on this version, ahead of our deliverable deadline for Knight of December 31st, when I got an email from our founder, of the sort we get sometimes at StoryCorps, an ambitious new idea needing the consultation of senior leadership. This time it was that Dave Isay was nominated for the TED Prize with an offer to make a wish limited to 100 words that, if it was accepted, TED would fund at $1 million. And with all the help and support we needed from the huge TED community. His wish? To build and release to the public a StoryCorps app, a platform for the human voice, to give this gift of StoryCorps to anyone who wanted it. It was an opportunity to scale our mission tremendously with a global initiative, eventually, maybe, to go from 5,000 interviews per year, our capacity with our signature booth model, to who knows what. And given the experiment with the Knight Foundation that was now winding down, even though we hadn't yet planned to launch the prototype to the public at large, we now knew our project could continue being improved affordably year after year if we built our app with PhoneGap. We knew that $1 million was sufficient to make a great app in any stack, but we were committed to do it only if it was something we could sustain long term. On a very tiny scale, we had a working proof of concept. Thank you. Now, we learned that David won the TED Prize several weeks before the announcement was made public, and when we found out he had won, we also found out that he would have to speak at the TED Talks in March, and that it was largely agreed, of course, this would be the best opportunity to debut this new platform to the world. So, 4 months to take our little Knight prototype and turn it into a public beta. Was it even possible? We quickly sent out an array of RFPs to support the work, one for design, one for building the app, and one for building the website and API. They were 1 page each, extremely simple. We invited firms to apply to work on the components that best aligned with their strengths. In the end, 2 applicants stood out as obvious partners for us. 10up, who we were introduced to through TED, and Maya, who we had been introduced to through Knight. Maya pitched working on designing and building the app, and 10up pitched WordPress support, building the server infrastructure, and auditing our code for scale. StoryCorps' team would code as much as we could somewhere in the middle and get people unstuck as often as we needed, offsetting the work of the other teams in our own areas of strength, particularly in architecting the archival aspects of the site, and building the central, very simple plugins that made it all fit together. By now, I was fully conscious of the fact that in the course of winning the Knight Award and the TED Prize and the resulting conversations, though, that app and platform and $1 million meant something different to everyone at StoryCorps, if not everyone on the planet, and that the images that the word app conjured in the imagination were as different and unique as each person doing the imagining. We didn't have much time for debate, though. We had to define some essentials and get started. We had to collectively agree on core functionality. What constituted an MVP as a platform for the human voice versus what could be relegated to later. We had to develop a strategy that would let us design, build, and test simultaneously, and we had to move quickly. We held a 2-day workshop with key staff facilitated by Maya's senior designer, an engineer, and a human scientist, a ton of Post-it notes of various sizes, colorful markers, and a few oversized worksheets and matrices that would allow us to visualize together a lot of different possibilities of what the app would become, and then prioritize them to trim down features that we could agree were nice-to-haves but not essentials. That way we could release something that was at least a complete product in a very short time period, knowing we couldn't exhaust all options of what was possible for the app in the first version. We held our workshop in the only available and affordable space in Manhattan in mid-December that we could find last minute and that would fit about 30 people, the basement of the Anne Frank Center. An auspicious location for me since I had just read her diary a year before, which was so much in the spirit of StoryCorps. The quick workshop gave us a nearly unanimous agreement on what we would build, and as it turns out, ours was one of the first projects to really stress the WordPress API. Here's Matt Mullenweg talking about it at a WordCamp a few weeks ago when WordPress 4.4 came out. And I must have taken that slide out, so you all know how to use Google. I suggest you find it. State of the word. By the end of February, we started to feel, and this is what our app looked like in that first design. By the end of February, we started to feel confident that we would be able to launch on schedule. We were circulating 2 or more builds per week to a small community of people who had worked on the project from all corners of StoryCorps, our board, to TED's founder, Chris Anderson, to our family and friends. We surveyed users, we took notes, we learned what people liked and didn't like, we simplified and simplified. We addressed the most grievous pain points in the app and made plans for future improvements, for all the components and features we could afford to put off until after the public beta launch. You know what? I'm behind on my screens. I'm sorry about that. So, I did have it in there. Before we knew it, we were in Vancouver for the big event, and at some point I remember sitting in a hot tub at the hotel, which was the only moment in 4 months of working on the project that I remember relaxing at all. It was the day of Dave's TED Talk, and almost everything that could be done was done. I was exhausted and looking forward to the days when life would be back to normal. That evening, as Dave began his talk, I realized that our project wasn't over, but that it was just beginning, and what we had just stepped into was a new normal. The app and platform launched successfully that night on March 16, 2015, to a global audience. We saw pretty decent download numbers and a solid amount of web traffic, and we got a ton of feedback. The servers handled the load beautifully. We discovered and resolved a few bugs that weren't as apparent before the platform scaled. In the next few weeks, back in New York, where we're based, we made plans to refactor the code to make it more efficient, stable, and easier to work on. We sprinted for a few quick wins, grabbing some low-hanging fruit on the way, and then we regrouped and got cozy for the many months it took us to start really improving on our MVP code. As some of you can probably attest, when you're moving very, very fast, trying to complete an MVP, you have to be comfortable leaving out a lot of features that you normally wouldn't if you had all the time in the world to build. We had by now, in mid-2015, a growing user community and a growing collection of interviews. As of today, less than a year after launch, over 70,000 interviews have been shared on our platform, and our community has grown to over 200,000 users. Here's one of the first interviews that told me that we were onto something big.
Hi, my name is Javier Bastos, April 29th, Sunday, and I'm going to interview myself regarding my recent illness. Can you tell me about your illness? It's a tumor that started to grow on my jaw called amyloblastoma. And I'm in the hospital now. I'm recovering. I have a tube up my nose. It's been a horrible process. Do you think about dying? To be truthful, I guess I always thought a little bit about dying, but this really made me realize and rethink that. It's something that I know it's inevitable, and you know it's going to happen, and it scares me. But at the same time, I accept it. Do you regret anything? Yeah. There were so many moments I wish I had savored more foods that I just guzzled, moments that I wish I'd just taken in. And I know that wanting to be alone is important, but I know now how important it is to be with family and friends and just enjoy their company. So it's a short interview, and just wanted to try out this app and see how it works. Maybe I'll share this with my kids or my wife. They are the soul, the heart of who I am.
Sorry, it always takes me a second after I listen to that. We haven't been able to find that participant, so if anybody knows him, please get in touch with me. So now we're focusing on stability, aiming at 0 crashes, 0 bugs, and our only issue reports coming from user error. Ambitious goal, but once we get there, things will start to get really fun. So let's talk a little bit about that. We're internally prototyping automatic speech-to-text transcriptions, working to make the app more searchable, and eventually fully accessible to disabled users. We're organizing ourselves to be able to accommodate virtually any human language, the groundwork for which we laid in the architecture of the API. We're stoked, frankly, but we have a long way to go before realizing the full potential of this thing. But even as a public beta, people seem to be really getting something out of the app. Here's a couple who used it for a very special occasion.
Well, this last question basically just says, take time to tell your interview partner what they mean to you. And so I'm going to say that to you. I absolutely adore you. You're easily the best thing that's ever happened to me in any way, shape, or form. While, like you said earlier, there's so many things that we may still be unsure about with our future, I can at least say that I know I want you in it. So, in the home that we've built together, in the lives that we've made together with each other, and in the family that we've started with our little furry friend here, Asia, Colleen, Annette, Adcock, will you do me the greatest honor? Will you marry me?
Yes. Of course I will.
And what better way than to talk about all the wonderful things that we've done in our lives so far, and then just think about the great things that's going to happen in the future.
Oh my gosh, you're so amazing.
And I don't know if you know, I didn't tell you this yet, but this can also be saved in the Library of Congress's archives forever, so that everyone can listen to this.
So happy.
I love you so much.
I love you too.
This has been my interview/surprise proposal to my wonderful girlfriend and now fiance, Asia. I'm Rory T. Miller, now the happiest man in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a different form of social media, to be sure. The StoryCorps app requires you almost to have another person present with you when you create an interview, though we're also doing some early prototypes of remote interviews in effort to support friends and family who might be living abroad. 2015 was an exciting year for StoryCorps, a challenging and ambitious one, but here we are today, thanks to PhoneGap, thanks to a lot of people who believed in us, and thanks to the people who work on the platforms that we use, who have never even heard of StoryCorps until now, thanks to a lot of people in this room who see the same potential that I see in PhoneGap and hybrid technologies. So go get the app or use the web interface at storycorps.me. Be part of what we're doing, give us feedback, write a plugin that we can use to make the app better. Let's show the world what PhoneGap and StoryCorps can do together. Let's set an example that other public good companies can follow. And finally, see if sitting down for an interview with someone in your life brings you closer to that person, inspires you to go deeper and be more open and understanding. Of all the people in your life, those who are most like you and those most different from you. When you do that, you benefit directly, but you also set an example that others will follow. And if we keep this up together, we can change the world for the better. I'm serious about that. So on behalf of the StoryCorps community, my deepest gratitude to all of you. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you. That was very powerful.
Thanks.